Hey, everybody, welcome to the Queen Comedy Podcast. It's James, and it's another great day. I have something that's amazing for you guys today because, most of the time, I think maybe twice we've had people that are not American talk about comedy, which is a unique perspective, right? Because if you're listening to this, most likely you're in America, most likely you're dealing with an American comedy scene, but comedy exists all over the world. And I think sometimes as Americans, we forget that comedy exists all over the world. So I have somebody today who's not American. He's a film journalist turned stand-up MC, promoter, and comedy coach. He has a passion for encouraging and supporting those who want to get into stand-up, just like me, and or at least use their comedy skills to enhance their private and business lives. Again, something I am very passionate about as well. And he has 3 online courses about writing, performing, and navigating comedy, plus 2 ebooks on stand-up. And it's just a great he's just great at doing it. And some of the titles and examples that he has are How to Be Funny, Funnier, right? Building connections and rapport with comedy, using humor to sell anything. I'm a big proponent of that. Feel the fear of performing stand up and do it away. So basically, don't be scared on stage and be more creative by using comedy. Again, something else I always push. He also created a cinematic system of stand up, which that part I'm very excited to hear more about, which uses filmmaking techniques to understand and bolster storytelling and a whole lot more in stand up. So please, all the way from London, please welcome Alfie Noakes. Alfie, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Thank you, JD.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have been watching the We Are Funny project on and off. I think it came across like my Instagram feed one time. And then I went to the site and I looked at stuff and I was like, this is very interesting. This is somebody taking, because I don't know if you know this, but in America, we have a ton of people selling like comedy classes and courses or whatever. But when I ask people that I know from Europe or that are overseas about it, they go, "Oh no, we kind of just go on stage, we kind of just do a thing, we're kind of learning." And I'm like, it's interesting because that used to be the old method in America of like early stand up was you just got on stage, someone was kind of your mentor a little bit maybe and gave you feedback or whatever, and then you just grew from there. But now we're in the era, at least the 90s started this, and now there's a lot more like comedy coaching and stuff like that. So what made you get to want to do that? What made you go from, especially from, journalist to stand up MC and producing comedy and all that stuff? Like, what's your journey there?
Well, I was originally, at the very beginning, a runner, the kid making the teas and the coffees in television, but I worked my way up to series producer, director, specialized in the cinema. I did the odd reality show, but the movies was my kind of mainstay. I did most of the British TV and radio shows about that in the 90s and the noughties. And then life changed. I shifted out of the business and then I just started helping a friend. Well, together we launched an open mic night. And I'd always been a huge stand-up comedy fan. I'd always secretly hankered to give it a go, but had never quite built up the stones to do it. I was really helping organise and run the night, and then finally had a go at open mic. I did very, very well my first time. One of the best first sets probably around. You've never seen such a hard fall for the second set, though. I only ever did about 8 or 9 sets. I'm something of a unicorn. While I'm this deeply immersed in comedy, I'm not a stand-up. What I did is I quickly moved to emceeing, and that was my groove. And then so I brought my TV production skills to running the shows. I split with the guy I was running the shows with, and we got it from our 1 or 2 gigs a week it was to I had it in 6 shows a week in 2 venues.
Wow.
And just too much. I couldn't MC all those shows myself. So I brought in one of the best MCs in Britain to teach a workshop to try and get some of the local acts to be able to help me with the workload. And then that was a success, and we ran another, and then I rolled it out to, I think, over the years, 16 different topics of live workshop, from musical comedy, writing comedy for radio, TV, neuro-linguistic programming for comedians we did a couple of times.
Wow.
And the beauty of that, of course, is I'm emceeing 4 nights a week, and I'm getting to take these workshops for free because I'm producing them. I'm sitting in on them and watching, and then I would take their lessons of what you should or shouldn't do, primarily what you shouldn't do. I had the privilege to take it onto the stage and test their theories, and they were right every time. All of these professional teachers nailed it. The one that stands out was a tip given in the emceeing class. I won't say what it was, but it was something you shouldn't say while bringing a female actor up. It's nothing awful and egregious.
Okay.
It's something I'm sure I would never have said anyway. but I was emceeing a couple of days later. I spoke to a female act friend of mine, told her about this, said, do you mind if I do this as I bring you up? I want to test the theory. And she was absolutely down for it. And my God, I never lost the audience so quickly in my life, to the point that one audience member, they booed me. I lost the room. And one audience member took the lemon slice from their drink and threw it at me. And quite
Wow.
marvelously, it stuck to my forehead. I mean, you couldn't write it. It was like a movie moment. So I learned a lot. I was emceeing, watching the acts up close and personal, watching new acts, pro headliners, watching acts develop over the years. And then I had all of these workshops where I was learning at the knees of masters. And over time, the newer acts are coming and asking me very often somewhat similar questions. So during lockdown, no shows to go, I recorded those first two workshops, online courses. The Stepping Into Stand-Up, which is for people who've never performed stand-up or are in their first 100 gigs. And then the even more niche, How to Be a Brilliant Stand-Up Comedy MC.
That's awesome. Now, here's the thing that happens, at least over here in LA and what I've seen in America. Most comedians don't want to be MCs. Do you struggle with finding good MCs in the UK as well?
The key word there was good. Now, there's plenty of people who want to have a go at it. Obviously, just like comedy itself, it's a fairly steep learning curve.
Right.
It's certainly a smaller percentage of people who want to give it a go, but those who've got the wisdom will realise that it's actually, it's an absolute superpower to getting better at your stand-up. As I say, I'm not an act, but I am funny and I can riff. I've got stories, from my life that I can draw upon. I can, I write topical jokes on the way to the gig. I'll look at the news headlines and I'll come up with jokes for that night. I'm suitably good to do that. But a lot of the acts don't really appreciate that. On my show, it's 5-minute spots, maybe 1 or 2 10-minute spots, and then a headliner, pro or semi-pro, doing 20 minutes. And of course, they're attracted because I give them space to do new material alongside their tried and tested, and then they can run that in the paid and pro rooms. But on a typical show of that bill, I'm on stage for about 25 minutes. So that is a lot of stage time when most of the open mic acts are dealing in 5-minute, maybe 7, maybe 10-minute spots. So in one night, I'm getting as much stage time as they are if they're out every night of the week. And of course, you're flexing different muscles. You're learning the crowd work, running a show. You're seeing something of the industry from a different side, keeping the show running to time, something like the bookings, the dark science, that is writing an appropriate running order. So I get quite a lot of people asking me, or have had people asking me, can they have a go at MCing? And very often I assess it based upon what I'm seeing of their character and their chops on stage already. I've never been short of MCs. I typically require them to go through some kind of training anyway. And, just as with any comedian, they're not going to be great to begin with. That's fine. I've never had a problem with an act not being great. And obviously, if they persevere, they will become better. My MCs have always turned out really well in the end, but I've probably run through about 30 of them in my rooms over the years by now, something like that.
Wow. Yeah, I've only had about 5 that I've worked through, and one of them went from emceeing my shows to emceeing like big music festivals and stuff like that, just because, and I let them run that for a year of just like, you're going to be here, you're going to run the show, this is what you have to do. And they would go through that process and come out a better MC after a year of doing that, and it's because it takes time. MCing is a skill that too many comedians go, I don't want to do that because I don't want to MC. I just want to do my time and go to the next thing and do my time and go to the next thing. I don't want to be MCing a whole show. And it's sad because it's a great skill.
Well, I think as you clearly know as well as I do, I said I'm on stage for an aggregate of 25 minutes, so maybe 8 minutes up top, a minute aggregate between the acts, 5 minutes at the top of the second part of the show, and of course wrapping up the show itself. And in that time, I can do some crowd work, which is something an actor doesn't normally get to do. So they're stretching new muscles. I can do some tried and tested stuff that I've thought of or used before, which is going to get guaranteed laughs. So I can run through my tested material. I will do some topical stuff. So that forces my hand in, generating new material, even though I don't care about running that material again. If it works, good, it goes in my back pocket. If it doesn't work, well, we don't talk about that. And at the next show, I'll have some new topical material. So it's more stage time. It's a chance to flex different muscles as far as crowd work and the like goes. It's a chance to run new material routinely, and it's a chance to polish that tried and tested material. It really is. I don't think there's a world-class comedian the likes we would think of having a Netflix special, or having a presence on historically Comedy Central and the like, BBC over here, who wouldn't have massive experience emceeing a show. Every one of them is totally capable of emceeing a show and has most likely done it hundreds and hundreds of times. Whereas I don't think there is a world-class act who is lacking that skill. So I think one of my favourite acts has come through my room. Over 10,000 people have performed in my room over the last 13 years. And my favourite amongst them has now become a very famous comedian here. And I was able to give him not his first, but one of his first open spots, like within his first 10 open mic spots.
Wow.
But I was able to give him his first 10-minute spot, his first headlining spot, his first emceeing, and his first paid spot. And watching what he did emceeing that night, I mean, he almost got into a punch-up with an audience member who was being out of line, but you can't go around beating up audience members. And he was clearly not the type of guy to mess with anyway. And now seeing where he is, I'm like, that lack of professionalism that I saw back in the day, that raw talent, would never make such a mistake as that now. But he was turbocharged through because he went into emceeing for probably the best part of a year. And when he came out the end of that, he was a completely refreshed figure, even though he was highly promising in the first.
Wow.
There's a lot to be said for emceeing. It's a lot of fun.
It is. It is. So with your courses that you have, the courses that you teach, what is there, do you have like a pipeline or like a order that you like people to take courses in or study in? Like, kind of explain, go through that with us.
There's 3 online courses. The names of 2 of them kind of dictate themselves. One is Stepping into stand-up comedy. That's quote unquote the beginners. So I think there's 22 sessions in that. The whole thing is step by step. Each of them is step by step. And at the end of each step, each chapter, so to speak, there's a wrap-up of the key takeaways and then a practical challenge, something the student should do before taking the next session. In the first case of Stepping into, the beginner's course, that's for people who've either never performed comedy, and of the 22 sessions, 20 of them are still highly relevant to somebody who's got 80 gigs. So it's also for people with what I call phase 1, 100 gigs, couple of gigs a week for a year, that's phase 1. So that's who Stepping into is for, step by step. Stepping forward is the advanced course. That's for people with greater than 100 gigs. That's much bigger. This is where I've got the cinematic system of stand-up. I'll explain that maybe afterwards if you're interested.
Yeah.
This runs at a total of 5.5 hours, which I know sounds really heavy. When I started making it, I would have guessed it was going to come in at 3 to 3.5. But so much information was fitting into the format, and I wanted that information in. So that's a course where there's about, forgive me, I might be mistaken, but I think it's about 18 sessions at about 20 minutes each. Again, with the premise of maybe doing 1 a week. And at the end of the session, there's a practical something. Spend your week doing that. It may take you 10 minutes. You might work on it 10 minutes a day. It's up to the student. And then come back. I've seen people rattle through that in 3 days. I'm well aware of that, but it's designed to be step by step over probably a 3-month window. That's why it's advanced. And then I have the course for MCs, which runs, I think, about 2.25 hours. Once again, broken into chapters, topic by topic, everything from marching and running order to how to bring an act on and off stage to protecting your acts, crowd work, everything you would expect. It's totally thorough. About 2.25 hours of material, again, averaging it about 15 minutes a session, something like that.
Wow. I think I'm going to take that advanced one. That sounds awesome. I mean, I have all that experience of traveling from coast to coast and Alaska to Texas and all over the place being a stand-up. So that's fine. But I always feel like there's always something you can learn from somebody else, or that you can learn, as even no matter how long you've been doing stand-up, there's something there's a little nugget everywhere you go. And I always try to learn what is, for the advanced people. So you're saying people who've done over 100 shows, are you saying shows or open mics, or just 100 times on stage?
100 times on stage in my mind. Okay. They've done open mic 100 times. Obviously, it's a fungible line in the sand.
Right.
But the premise for Stepping forward, there's more than one premise behind it. I'll explain in a second.
Yeah, please.
But it is ultimately to show people how to, obviously, the key 2 things are improving your writing, improving your performance. And there's about half the course is focused exclusively on those. And I'll explain the framework in a second, because that's the cinematic system of stand-up.
Yeah.
And then the latter half, or maybe latter third, is more focused on navigating the scene when you're dealing with things like critics, competitions, marketing, publicity, filming yourself. Ultimately, explaining how you're more likely to get an agent and what a good agent should do for you. I've seen far too many acts get excited that they've got an agent and they haven't paid attention to the quality of that agent. And that's really important. So maybe if it's okay with you, I'll explain something more of the concept, the cinematic system. It was very early days of being, running open mic nights, and I just saw so much overlap with the world of cinema, which I used to report on, like for over a decade, in both print, radio, and primarily television. I ended up making lots of documentaries about cinema, so lots of interviewing famous people, filmmakers, visiting sets, deep dives into certain movies. King Kong with Peter Jackson was just one. And the storytelling aspect of it became very clear to me quickly. And then really it was when I started putting this premise together, slowly but surely in my brain over a decade, really. It was stand-up comedians and filmmakers are, they both have to generate stories, the story by credit, if you like. They've got to write the script. They're going to produce their own efforts, which is basically the production that is everything off stage, booking your gigs, getting there on time, taking the time to apply for the competitions and understanding the rules, everything that goes with it. Everything off stage is the producer, everything on stage is the result of the director. Every actor is their own director. And of course, they're their own leading role. Understanding things like stagecraft, there are 9 points on the stage to operate from. I've barely met an open mic comedian who understands that. So I've got a whole kind of graphic built in, which explains the power spots on the stage, when you want to be more intimate with your crowd, when you want to step back, how you can set up a joke on stage left, drift across stage right, and then deliver the punch. That's a common kind of Chris Rock technique. So all of these things are baked in. And then we get into things like hair, makeup, and wardrobe. With all due respect, I think it's typically more a concern for female acts than male acts. But, I would always put on a tasteless shirt akin to this before a show. Within 5 minutes before the show, I would always go into a tasteless, colourful shirt. And somehow or other, psychologically, I slipped into a show mode. There's a great pro comedian here. His image is partly by wearing a white smart suit jacket. He's the same. He moves into comedy mode the minute that jacket goes. So we're looking at things like makeup, hair, wardrobe, how you present yourself. And then, as I mentioned, you've got marketing and publicity. How are you going to do that? Navigating the social media landscape. I actually mentioned something in some detail there about social media when I recorded it earlier in the year. And I warn about investing too much of your content on a social media platform. And in my mind, I was thinking of Vine, because I had friends who were very successful on Vine a few years ago, and then that just got taken. I've built most of my stuff on my website, like front and center, but over the years, Facebook, because I've been going so long, was also the bedrock. There's something approaching 10,000 people on there now. But I was also thinking of TikTok. There's this discussion that TikTok could get banned, but actually what happened is Elon Musk bought Twitter, and at least half of my friends I know have now left Twitter. So the idea is not only how you would film yourself, sound and camera considerations, but also where you're going to put it. And also how wise is it to put out your jokes in year one, which almost by definition is going to be the weakest material you ever deliver. And that stuff can come back and haunt you. Yep. So probably better to invest your time in writing and getting stage time than trying to get likes and follows on, what will be possibly your worst material ever. Invest your time here and then build your website. That's where your hub for everything should be. So, that's some aspects of marketing and publicity. It goes much deeper. Obviously, independent films tend to break at independent film festivals or film festivals, whether that's Sundance or Cannes, Toronto, Berlin, wherever it might be. And that's typically where the critics are, the agents are. They're paying attention to the big competitions. So whether you're a breakthrough comedian or whether you're Quentin Tarantino, you broke at a competition and doing well. Tarantino broke Reservoir Dogs at Sundance, and of course, Pulp Fiction, his next film, wins at Cannes. So that's there were only 3 aspects of it that I truly felt like I had to go outside and get information from. I could cover everything else myself, but when it came to critics, competitions, and agents, I thought it was right to do some outside research. So I interviewed really great people in each territory. So critics and reviewers is obviously something filmmakers and comedians on the up have to deal with. Actually defining the difference between reviewers and critics. I used to consider myself a film critic at one time. Actually, having spoken to the comedy critic, I realized, if anything, I was probably a high-end reviewer. there is in fact a difference between the two, and I break that down in the course as well. The competitions are all important. Once you've got to a standard, there's no point trying too soon. And then ultimately you're navigating towards that agent. And I include plenty of information of what you should be finding out from the agent. What do they want to know of you? What do you expect of them? You know, people get too excited, go, I can get an agent. Yeah, but if it's a rubbish agent, it's actually a backward step. If you get a great agent, they're going to work you, they're going to blood you, they're going to give you hard gigs, they're going to give you insight and become some kind of personal director. The right agent is so much more important than an agent. So these are many of the major things, but there's other aspects in there. So that's what I've called the cinematic system of stand-up. First half, 2/3, writing and performing. Last third or so is navigating the scene to the ultimate goal, really, of getting an agent. Once an open mic act has moved to the point of getting an agent, then they're very much closing in on the territory of being a pro, and they don't need courses from people like me. That agent should be the one moving them forward. That was a long answer. You're a patient man, JD. Thank you.
No, I love it. This is exactly what I like to hear. Now, I do have 3 questions that came out of that. First is, with social media stuff, do you feel like comedians should be putting crowd work clips or their actual stand-up? Because that's a kind of a debate that's happening over here that I hear from all my comedy friends of crowd work clips versus actual real material.
You said 3 questions, so I trust your memory is good enough to remember what 2 and 3 are going to be.
Yes, correct.
Let me be clear, I'm not a big social media fan myself. I'm not on it very much. As I used to be a film journalist, I spent most of my formative years in screening rooms watching films and then going out and filming stuff about it and then going into a windowless edit suite and doing it all over again. So by the time social media came around, I'd moved into live comedy, and I'd really embraced live comedy because I'd spent so much time on screen or watching screens that living life on social media and doom scrolling, as so many people do, is something I veered away from. So I'll need to be clear, I'm not much of an expert here. But yeah, The fact is, if you do record your tried and tested material and put it out, to a degree, you've burned it. Certainly if you do a Netflix special or a major television appearance, we both know, you know, most people know comedy's based on surprise primarily. And if they've seen the joke before on a TV show and they come and see you live and you do the same set, they're not going to love you. Conversely to music, of course, where we tend to become more fond the more we're familiar with the music. And so I fully understand why the crowd work stuff is catching on social media so far, because it straddles that line. It shows the comedian is funny. You know, I teach students right across the board. If you are off the cuff, if a joke can ever be marked out of 10, 1 being crickets and 10 is rolling laughter, if you are off the cuff, or at least, and I give tips on how to give the appearance of being off the cuff, when in fact it's been tried and tested before, of course. If the joke would get, say, 5 out of 10 worth of laughs, it'll always get a couple of extra points. It'll become a 7 out of 10 level of laughter if you give the impression of being sincerely off the cuff. So the crowd work clips always give the impression of being off the cuff, rightly so. So it's a way of them showing they're funny, getting those bonus points by being off the cuff without burning material. I can see why the comedians are doing it. I am starting to witness something of an issue where new audiences are coming in and then actually less aware of what to expect than before because they're expecting more of the crowd work. Yep. I very strongly recommend that new acts, and that's phase 1, year 1, you know, just stay the hell away from crowd work. You know, don't ask the audience a question. Hey, has anybody here been on holiday to Greece? Yep. When they just want to say, I've just been on a holiday to Greece, and then go into their bit about Greece. Because when you say, hey, has anybody here been on a holiday to Greece? You're opening the doors of madness, potentially. Yep. You don't know who's in that room. It's just a numbers game. Sooner or later, you're going to have some pissed idiot in the back of the room. Sorry, I'm aware this is the Clean Comedy Podcast, and I just used the P word. You can bleep me or just have me as a mouthy limey, however you want to have it, JD. Sorry about that. But you can have some drunk. And by the way, the P word, pissed, means different words. Over in your world, it means angry. Over here, it means drunk. Just to be clear. So when I say a pissed audience member, I mean drunk, not angered. So, of course, they can be both. So, yeah, if you say, anybody here been on holiday to Greece as a means into your bit, you've asked them a question. They're either going to not answer you, which leaves a lull in the show while you pause for an answer, maybe, or 15 people are going to answer, and it's a cacophony of what am I doing with this, or you're going to have some idiot determined to tell you about getting mugged when they're on holiday in Athens 3 years ago, or whatever it is. So I strongly urge new acts, just stay away from the crowd work. Let the MC take care of it. By and large, if you just persevere, you can get through it. An open mic act with just 5 minutes on stage, which is kind of standard here in London. Outside of London, I think it's more like a 10-minute spots, but it's so competitive here. It's 5-minute spots. You know, I speak quickly. I've slowed myself down a bit for this interview, but I am naturally a fast talker. But the average person speaks at 3 words a second. So a 5-minute set is only 900 words. You know, probably 850 if you allow for kind of breaks, beats, applause breaks and the like. So if you even just do 15 seconds of some kind of crowd work or engaging with an audience member, you're losing percentage points of your actual stage time, which is all important. So I really, really encourage my newer acts or the newer acts, just stay away from crowd work for at least phase 1, 100 gigs that first year. Maybe you can start playing with it later. But, you know, you're basically coming with a script. You've worked really hard. You've had ideas. You've rehearsed it. You've revised it. You've edited it. Why would you let some drunken muppet in the room take 5% of your time? Because they're not going to come up with anything good. And if they do, well, that doesn't reflect great on you either. So it's a lose-lose. So long answer again, JD, because I get excited about smart questions. I understand why crowd work is the platform that's working for comedians online who are trying to get followers. I understand they don't want to burn the material. I think they shouldn't. So I think it's just a natural place where it's fallen. I am, however, as I say, observing newer audiences coming in and apparently becoming somewhat surprised that there's not more riffing with the crowd. Yeah. And as an MC, they're kind of engaging with me a little bit more sometimes.
Yeah. Now, as far as the roadmap that you laid out for how comedians progress and stuff, it appears in the UK, that's not really the same roadmap in America. You're not looking at getting a manager or agent probably for 5, 7, 10 years sometimes, unless you're really, already you get a TV break or something like that. Is that different in the UK? Is it faster to be able to get an agent to someone to get you moving forward quicker, or is that just something that you see as the next level after you've kind of mastered stand-up comedy over there, or at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think anybody's ever mastered stand-up comedy, but I do take your point entirely. Yeah. This is basically the stepping forward course, as I said, for phase 2, 100 plus gigs. Probably includes phase 3, 4, 5, 6, and however many phases there can be. It is substantially to make one a far superior stand-up comedian by writing better and performing better. It's the writer, producer, actor roles all kind of coming into effect. My expectation is that open mic act is going to remain on the open mic scene for quite some time, and we are probably talking years, using those skills and their own inherent ability to get better, to write better, to perform better, and then make themselves visible at the competitions at the point when they feel they can start navigating towards the idea of doing well in competitions and having an agent. So if phase 1 is 1 year, and that's my beginner stepping into, phase 2 is phase 2 and everything that comes after, until you get an agent. And then at that point, the agent and obviously the act working with their agent will navigate everything from there. So that's arguably why it's quite so long at 5+ hours, because it's covering arguably years of development. The fastest I've seen an act do it here, in fact, there's a blog on my website all about him. I don't typically name acts in interviews, but in this case, I'll make an exception. As a brilliant act and a lovely man called Emmanuel Sanubi. This year was for the second time nominated for the top prize at Edinburgh Festival. He did his first ever gig with me, and I wrote a blog about him. He ended up on one of our biggest comedy shows live at the Apollo on the BBC. So I wrote a blog about him probably about 2 years ago, using him as an example as best practice, because he really was. He worked it right. He's got the right attitude. He's a massive big guy. When I first met him, he was a nightclub bouncer. He's like a 6'2" Nigerian, 18-stone guy. Absolute sweetheart, but my God, scary as hell if he decided he wanted to. And obviously he would play with that on stage. So I wrote a blog all about him, going, look, he's pretty much best practice, and it took him 6 or 7 years, give or take a pandemic. And this is, in my mind, how he did it, because I saw him very regularly for those first 2 or 3 years. And, if you really want to get professional and you've got this kind of skill, Emmanuel Sanubi is a great example. I believe he's just been announced as the host of Live at the Apollo, which is obviously the one step you can go beyond just appearing on it. So yeah, there's a blog, a wonderful example in how you can learn from him. Something like that is on my website.
Perfect. Now, the other thing is, I keep hearing this from a lot of people who know people in the UK who say it's easier to get a TV credit in the UK as a comedian than it is in America. Is that common? Is that something that happens a lot? Because you guys have like a lot of
what kind of TV credit?
Well, I think that you guys have like talk shows or game shows or like shows that they can like get on TV easier as a comedian. Is that true?
Well, obviously, I'd have to be super familiar with the American system, but I mean, everybody in the world is pretty familiar with the American system to a larger extent because LA is, the home of entertainment. It's an industry town. I did work in the industry and shoot a lot of programs in America. I don't necessarily know if it's more or less easy. We probably have less outlets. We don't really have the late night talk show format you have. 5 nights a week. We tend to do 2 or 3 of them at the same time on a Friday night. We've tried it over here. Our British equivalent to Letterman will be Jonathan Ross, and then also kind of Graham Norton will be some kind of Colbert type. Both brilliant men. I've had the privilege of working with Jonathan in the past. Absolutely wonderful man. But we tried a version of that back in the 90s. We just not enough celebrities in England to justify, or the UK, to justify 5 nights a week. You really start scratching the bottom of the barrel very quickly. When Channel 5 launched here in the late 90s, they tried it with a guy called Jack Doherty. And actually, he was on holiday. So the fill-in act was Graham Norton, and Jack Doherty, I think, never got to come back. Graham Norton was so good. And now he's arguably the top talent at the BBC, or amongst the top 3. He's a superstar. And a great chat show host. So there's probably less avenues here. I think our radio is stronger than in America. We've got several BBC stations, national stations, as well as local. And Radio 4, I think the nearest parallel we have to NPR.
Okay.
But with all due respect, vastly superior, Radio 4. And they have a lot of programs that are a good breeding ground for comedians and comedy writers. That's probably the first significant step I see guys and girls that I've known in my room, once they've got an agent, is they end up writing on a show or getting a half-an-hour special on Radio 4. And then the very best of those Radio 4 shows can turn into TV shows, Alan Partridge. I'm sure you would know Alan Partridge, the Steve Coogan character, and everything Armando Iannucci did. They began as a Radio 4 show. Chris Morris's stuff, it was all Radio 4. So probably radio stronger here as an easier option in, and then because we have things like the BBC, the wonderful BBC, they can talent spot who's done particularly well on a Radio 4 show, topical news show, and then maybe move them to a television equivalent or make that format for television. Obviously, that's at the higher end. That's the tip of the pyramid. But as far as it being more or less easy, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Is the conclusion I draw from
that's good.
Another very long answer. There are definite routes, that's for sure. Definite routes.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like there's as many, there's not a direct route for comedians at all. It's kind of like wherever you can kind of get in or fit in and stuff. There's not
I'll
really.
give you one direct route.
Okay.
Is if you go to Cambridge University here in England and you're part of their Footlights, which is their kind of drama, comedy, sketch group, like the talent that has come from there is extraordinary. I'm not suggesting the people who come from there only get their television and epic success because they went to Footlights. They went to Footlights and they're incredibly talented. We're talking about the likes of Stephen Fry and David Mitchell and the like. But Emma Thompson, generation after generation, back to the Monty Python crew. Right. For 50 years, the Cambridge Footlights has fed the British comedy scene over and over again. There are others who get their way in, but being a member of the Cambridge Footlights here makes you comedy elite by the time you're in your early 20s. And most certainly the BBC and other commissioners pay attention to that. I'm not aware of there being an equivalent to that in America, other than maybe being an alumni of Groundlings, Second City, UCB, something like that.
If you wrote in Lampoon back in, I think it's
PJ O'Rourke and Conan,
Yeah, that might be, that was
That's
probably
actually
about the
a fair parallel. You're right. Yeah, the National Lampoon would be a good American equivalent, I believe.
Yeah, the Harvard Lampoon. If you worked it there, and then you could get to National Lampoon and do whatever. But even the National Lampoon got bought, and it's not even the same Lampoon anymore. But the Harvard Lampoon, if you go there, it's a good step into getting into other stuff.
Well, I'll put my John Cleese against your PJ O'Rourke any day of the week.
Oh yeah, well yeah, John Cleese wins every time. No offense, PJ O'Rourke, but no, John Cleese wins every day of the week. So
I'm glad to hear it, yeah.
yeah. Oh no, big fan. So this is great. What in there you have so the books, the ebooks and stuff, and the courses. What if people want to invest in this kind of stuff? What are they looking at? What's the price ranges for them? If you could do US dollars, that'd be great. If not, it's okay.
I can give you an approximation US dollars. I believe it's approximately 20% above the pound, give or take, is translation. So the beginner's course, as I say, that's about 2.5 hours. That's £99. It's approximately $120. The advanced courses, I consider both the MCing, how to be a brilliant MC, stand-up comedy MC, and the stepping forward, that's cinematic system, that's the big epic 5 and a bit hours. They're both £197. So I guess that puts it in approximately the $240 category. Obviously, it's lifetime access. Once somebody buys a course, it's theirs forever, and then they can dip in and out. And it should be the gift that keeps on giving. Once they've done the course, they should obviously go out and gig and go, actually, there was something I remember in that course, go back, check out session 8, do that again. It's there to kind of keep helping over and over. With the live workshops that I mentioned, where this kind of began, really they're only helpful to people that are within a certain area of London. I have had people flying from Norway and coming from Wales and more distant places like Bristol and Brighton. England's a relatively small country at the end of the day, but if you don't live in London, you couldn't access these workshops that I was putting on. And as I said, as an MC, I was regularly getting asked the same 100 or so questions would come round and around. And then sitting on the workshops that I was producing, I'd still get, the guy who teaches my clowning workshop is Dave Thompson. He was Tinky Winky in the Teletubbies. A wonderful man, a brilliant stand-up comedian. But even in a workshop about clowning, the students would ask about heckling. I mean, that's really not a thing for them to worry about, but these questions about hecklers will come up over again and again. So I like to think I'm in a fairly solid position to know what it is newer comedians, whether that's brand new, never done it, or 100 gigs in or 300 gigs in. I know what's on their mind because they've asked me. I've seen them bring it up in workshops. So of course, that's gone into the courses. And then, of course, people have the option to bundle them together. If you buy 2, it becomes a bit cheaper. If you buy 3, a bit cheaper. Or you can bundle them with one-to-one coaching. I do one-to-one coaching on Zoom as well. So there's all sorts of permutations and variations.
I know that you have a free ebook, and then you have. Is there another ebook that costs money, or are they both? Is there 2 free? No, one free and 2. Okay.
I wrote 2. I had 8 problems comedians run into and how to handle them. And that was basically a free download when people join the mailing list at wearefunnyproject.com. And having had that there for a year or so, I wanted to write a new one. So I've just switched them up. So people can't get their hands on 8 problems that comedians might run into until I decide that I want to bring it back. Currently, if somebody signs up to the mailing list, they'll get 8 ways to turbocharge your stand-up comedy, which has got lots of video links in it and links to extra blogs. So it's more than just the sum of its parts. So 8 ways to turbocharge your comedy when you sign up on the mailing list.
That's awesome. Well, what else? Is there anything else you want to promote? Anything else that you want people to be aware of that I didn't touch on? Because we went over a lot, but I still feel like maybe we only scratched the surface here, honestly. But
well, I think I get the impression you and I could talk for weeks and weeks, and that would be a delight in its own right. I mean, I'm on a mission. I really think comedians, once they know they've got the bug, maybe give it till they've got 100 gigs or so under their belt. They've got a feeling for it. They've probably started making some friends on the scene. But MCing is a way to really kind of turbocharge themselves. And there's very few decent MCs on the open mic circuit. And therefore, when you prove yourself to be a good one, you become in very high demand. There's way more paid opportunities for somebody to MC. There's all the charity events and work dues, and just a lot more opportunity to apply that skill set in the outside of the comedy club world. And also just makes you a better comedian in your own right. So I'm on a bit of a mission to try and get comedians to understand that, and have been doing that for years, frankly. And just simply encouraging other people to have a go at stand-up and not just do it once, because that first time will just be all about the nerves and then winning because you've passed the psychological barrier of doing it. People are very scared of this. You also get brownie points. You know this as well as I do. You get brownie points socially if you mention to people that you do stand-up comedy. Yeah. They may not know that you're a terrible stand-up comedian, but the very fact that you do it is is fascinating to people. But I think people should do it at least half a dozen times in at least half a dozen different venues and understand, hey, that was a good night run by somebody who knows what they're doing. And I met some really nice people and it had a crowd. And this one was a nightmare. The promoter started the show late. There was only comedians in the audience and started getting a feel for the scene. I have seen, because obviously I run so many open mic shows, I've seen certain types of people enter the scene. You've obviously got the person who's funny and their friends have told them they should give it a go. That's a classic, of course. And they quickly realize it's not quite the same skill set. But once they pivot, they usually do pretty well pretty quickly. I see a lot of people who have gone through some change in their life, often in their late 30s and 40s. It could be a divorce, something like that, where they've suddenly got a lot more time on their hands. They don't necessarily have the family life they had before, and they're looking for something to do. And, you know, this is so much better than playing golf, isn't it? You know, it's a version of going to the pub regularly, but you're going to try and make people laugh. The people around you are going to try and make you laugh. I get quite a few audience members who will come and ask me, you know, how do I have a go at this? And once I explain to them just how simple it is, effectively email me at the right time, and this is my email address, and give them stage time. So I really want people to know it doesn't matter that you don't really want to be a professional. I think it's a very small percentage of the open mic community here in London who truly have professional ambitions. Most people are hobbyists to some degree or another, and that's absolutely fine. I think that's absolutely fine. You don't have to be a killer act. That takes a bit of time. You take courses such as mine, that will help you get there faster for sure. But it's a great hobby. It's got transferable skills right across the board. And I just think more people should give it a go. It's a kind of a bucket list thing, but not just once, at least half a dozen times to get a true feel for it.
Yeah.
First taste of it.
Yeah. I was both of those things, by the way. I was the person that everyone said, oh, you're funny, you should do it. And I didn't know how to do it. I thought it was like you had to be famous first and then you could do stand up, right? So I didn't understand the process. And then it was also on my bucket list of things. So when I was about to turn 35, my wife was like, you should go try this. And so that's how that started. And then there you go. So both of those, I had both of those roads occurring at the same time. And I was like, there's no way I'm funny enough to be on stage. I should go learn how to do this before I ever go up there. And that was my process of getting there. So.
Yeah, no, I get it. I've always been kind of surprised. There's some people, when I did the first course, professional comedian friends of mine were like, you can't teach funny. I'm like, I can definitely teach funny, yeah. Like, there's no two ways about it. Yes, the student absolutely has to bring themselves into it. You know, I was super mindful of not just creating a course that will create cookie cutters and like, this is the process. My courses are definitively based upon the idea of drawing upon the experience of the act themselves. It asks them to go into your own memory, your own experiences, your own role. You might therefore be thematically talking about the same things, but it will be your story, it will be your observation. And to the credit of those several pro comedians that were giving me that kind of grief, each and every one of them has relented and gone, no, you're right, you can teach funnier. And you don't have to take the long way around. I can't do any plumbing. I'm not a plumber, for example. Okay, if anything, any pipe in this house breaks, I'm in trouble. Okay. But if I spent 2 hours with a plumber and you said, okay, that's what this tool's called, this is what this pipe does. Okay, in just 2 hours, I would know 1,000% more than I knew 2 hours earlier. That could only be helpful if there's a leak. I might not be good enough to fix the leak, but I can probably stem it, maybe give it a bit of informed information to the plumber who I still have a need to call. I don't really understand why acts put so much, new open mic acts I'm referring to. You know, it's a lot of investment, as you obviously understand. You know, it's a chunk of an evening. You might be on stage for 5 minutes, but you're out for the evening.
Yep.
You're traveling across town. You're looking for ideas. You're constantly writing stuff. You're rehearsing, writing, editing, filming yourself, looking back at it. You're going to spend money on travel, a couple of drinks, maybe a donation to the show, a takeaway on the way home. It's a significant investment of time. Why would you do it the long way around when there's some really, and not for me alone, my courses are brilliant. My reviews show that. My reviews are just stellar across the board. And they come with a guarantee, my courses, by the way. I'd like to make that clear, a 30-day money-back guarantee. But there are other people that will teach, either in live or online. They're going to show you so many of the rookie errors that you can sidestep, or at least be ready to anticipate so you handle them better. And therefore, you're just going to progress that much more quickly. So if my course, the beginners, is £100, $120, you know, that's the cost of 5 shows, attending 5 shows, maybe. The advanced course, therefore, about 10. you're going to learn so much more in these courses than you're going to learn at any single 5 or 10 shows you ever attend. And, become more respected, more of a face on the scene that much more quickly. To me, it's obvious.
Yeah.
But obviously, new people don't know what they don't know. And so let them do it the old school way and just thrash it out on stage. I've seen so many acts do it that way, and they do get there. I'm not saying they won't. They just took longer to get there than they needed to.
Yeah, if you could find a shortcut, if you could get a little bit of knowledge that'll help you jump ahead a little bit, then that's always good to go. I don't know if you ever played Super Mario back in the day. People would tell you like, oh, you could go from like level 2 to like level 4, using this shortcut. You're still playing the game, you're still getting to the end of the game and all the stuff you need to get to, but you just jumped over something. Why not use it? Why not use it to your advantage?
I don't have the Mario reference. I didn't play it. So, no, I'm obviously super well what it is, but I didn't play that. But as you began speaking and then mentioned Mario, I was already thinking of, I used to play a reasonable amount of pool,
Okay.
And then one day a friend of mine just gave me a single tip, which is just bend down lower and look down the length of your cue, like your eye line should be almost at the edge of the table. That single tip improved my game 500%. And then he gave me a different tip the following week, which improved it another 500%. And then I didn't get much better, but 2 pieces of critical information made all the difference. And all of my courses at the end of each session, they have a key takeaways wrap up at the end, reminding you all of the key points. There's over 150 key takeaways in each of the courses. If just 3 of them make you 10% better, they've paid for themselves. But to be honest, it will be a lot more than just 3 of them. It's just good advice given to the right person at the right time.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you, Alfie. You guys, I'm going to put all the links in the show notes for this, so you guys go check it out. I'm gonna check it out. I have been already reading blog posts. I got downloads from his site, so I'm like already invested in it, anyways. And the fact that he reached out to me too, it's funny because I was going to reach out to him, and he reached out to me first before I could reach out. So it must have been one of those things in the universe where like we were on the same wavelength, right?
Synchronous great minds. Synchronous great minds.
Exactly. So thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Alfie, for coming on. I'll put everything in the show notes there. Please like, subscribe, go check out wearefunnyproject.com. And there's a bunch of stuff on there. It'll be really great for you guys. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.